Two unemployed actors, two unemployed actors. They're just between projects.
Welcome back to Two Unemployed Actors. I'm Max, and today Sam has managed to catch the plague. He's actually crook. So, and coincidentally, our producer as well, Amanda, and also our social media manager, Caitlin. So, and meanwhile, I've spent the last week in LA partying, and I'm fine. But anyway, don't fret. Today we have a special guest, actor Jordana Beatty. Jordana plays Bonnie in the series Young Rock from Universal Television and NBC. Also in the 10th anniversary tour of Billy Elliot the musical, so extremely talented. And plenty of television commercials before her breakout US television role in the series Legend of the Seeker, but probably best known for the lead title role in the feature film Judy Moody and the Not Bummer Summer opposite Heather Graham. Jordana, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
That's okay. Appreciate you making the time.
I'm excited.
Good. You've been in front of the camera from about the time you learned to talk. So often I'll ask actors, how did they come to this decision that they wanted to act? But I guess it was kind of, I don't know, were you always on show for your parents?
Yeah, I can't really remember a time where it wasn't in my life. So I think that's pretty telling, but I'm so grateful for that because I've got so much of an appreciation having been involved since such a young age, I guess. It's obviously a very different experience as you kind of get a bit older and you get to different ages. So I'm so grateful to have, done stuff when I was young. I think there's stuff in there that I don't actually quite remember. Some of that really, really early like TVC stuff, I don't even remember it, but I'm grateful for it all.
I'm sure it looks like you had a great time in everything you've done anyway, looking back at it. It's like, wow, that looks like I had so much fun.
Kind of before digital age, I guess, was fully around for a lot of that young stuff. I don't even think I would have seen a lot of it, but we know it's out there somewhere in the abyss.
Well, it wasn't long before you started working in Hollywood, working on the television show Legend of the Seeker, and of course your most famous role is Judy Moody. How did your US career come about, or was it really kind of organic? You've got this body of work in Australia and then it kind of just grew?
I think it would probably be a little bit of both.
Right.
Very soon before I got Legend of the Seeker, I was cast in a worldwide search as Eloise for the movie Eloise in Paris. And they did auditions in Australia, they did them in lots of countries, and they narrowed it down to, I think there was 5 of us off the top of my head. So I was flown into America and we all did a screen test, and from there I was given the role. So I guess that was kind of before Skype was even really, really a thing. That was kind of unheard of then. So you literally got flown over for an audition,
How old were you then?
Which is great. I want to say I was about 8 or 9 off the top of my head. Yeah, so that was a great experience. But then with the global financial crisis, unfortunately, the movie didn't get made. That was slated to be with Uma Thurman and a few others, but it didn't go ahead. But it did open the doors to me for lots of, I met a lot of people while I was over there for that short stint. It enabled me to get some American representation and, just make a few connections over there, which probably helped along in terms of when we got to Judy Moody, where I kind of had, I guess, there was a little knowledge around me. It wasn't completely this new girl from Australia by then. So a bit of both, probably.
That's great. Well, there's so many reasons why movies can't get made sometimes. There's so many moving pieces to it. And I think you certainly start to appreciate the business behind it. I imagine that might have been a bit hard, though, as an eight-year-old to try and understand. You go into all this effort and then, it's different.
I guess the saving grace there was I never officially got told, oh, it's not happening. It was one of those things that kind of just getting pushed and, okay, it's this time and then it'll be this time. There was never an official, oh, it's not happening. So in that way, I guess it was probably easier to take because then I got some other stuff along the way. I wasn't just kind of high and dry, but looking back, of course, it's disappointing. But yeah, again, it did open those doors for me. And it would have been a great movie. It hasn't been made as of yet, but hopefully one day someone else gets that opportunity. But for me, I was lucky that it wasn't just kind of a blanket shutdown, which I know lots of people would have experienced in the current climate. So a little bit different to that.
Well, I mean, from a child in Australia, then going on to work on these huge Hollywood shows and films, what was that like?
Honestly, it was just such a surreal feeling at the time. Like, I knew how lucky I was at the time, but I was just so busy enjoying absolutely every aspect of it that I don't think it quite dawned on me during the time I was there. Right. I was just too busy having fun, being on set, doing school still, that kind of thing, just making all these memories that it probably wasn't until I kind of came back and saw it on a big screen, or even when I got a little bit older, that I could fully appreciate just, I guess, the magnitude of it for that time. Yeah, when things weren't as digital, so it was a lot different. But so many great experiences.
That's great. And I mean, I guess probably you focused on doing a job, and school. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
a couple of major distractions there. You probably just noticed that there were lots more people running around a Hollywood set than there were an Australian one. Do you find yourself approaching a role, like approaching a character in your preparation a bit differently? I mean, obviously now than when you were 8, but I'd hope maybe not. It's working for you.
No, I see what you're saying. Honestly, for me, the big process itself is very similar. I like to read scripts, often like the whole script if you've got that opportunity, which is very, I mean, you never know if you're going to have that chance to or not, but I do love having that just to kind of get a really good idea of the character. Mm-hmm. I always liked that back then, except the difference was back then my mum would often like read them to me kind of like a story, so I wasn't kind of flicking through pages myself. Yeah. So that was very lovely of her. And but similar thing now, like to do that, like to kind of get as much info about the character as you can, which sometimes there's heaps, which is great. Other times there's barely anything, which I also don't mind because you get to kind of, go for gold, put your own spin on things.
Story,
but I quite like that as well. There's so many different approaches, which keeps it interesting.
I imagine you learned a lot taking on the leading role in Judy Moody, especially about comedy. Like I find comedy so challenging. But I mean, as a child actor too. But what do you think would be your biggest learnings that came from that experience?
Oh, well, from a comedy side of things, I'd have to say that I was very lucky to have such good writers. I mean, they wrote it all in there. There was one memory that sticks out in particular where we hadn't started filming yet. It was still that pre-production phase, and we were in a meeting with the director, John Schultz, and so it was him, myself, and Heather Graham, and we were just reading through a few of the scenes. And I don't remember if he said, feel free to change this or add something here, or if we just did it. But I remember we swapped roles for a second, and I ad-libbed one of her lines, and he thought it was hilarious, and it ended up in the movie. So for me, that's great, I've made my mark in the writing there. But that's probably it for the comedy side of things. Mm-hmm. I was lucky to just, have such great material to work with, because I've actually, I guess, done, a good amount of, I guess, kind of drama and more serious stuff as well. So it's good that there's been that mix, and I wouldn't even necessarily say I have a big preference to like a draw to either of them. I just quite like a big mix.
That's great.
Yeah.
What do you think have been some of the advantages of starting out so young and essentially, learning from your experiences acting on the job almost in some ways?
I think one of the biggest things is that a lot of people either don't realize, or they realize once they get there and they're a bit older, that there's so much, not necessarily downtime, but kind of waiting around time. There's all that preparation time, as in while they're setting up everything and you yourself are getting prepared, along with all the amount of takes something takes, the amount of shots that something takes. So there's just so much time involved, which I feel like if you're not really anything to do with the industry, you just kind of watch this stuff, fair enough, you wouldn't quite understand. But for me, being so exposed to that since I was so young, it was never an issue for me whatsoever. I loved either watching people set up and do that kind of thing, or I had I knew how to feel in that time. I read so many books when I was filming Judy Moody. It was crazy. But all those kinds of things that I just think people don't probably realize until they get there.
Yeah.
But for me, I've never thought twice about it. It's just like, oh, that's just, a key part of it.
And imagine between like a television show and a feature film, it's quite different too in terms of, the amount of takes you can get. And how much footage they capture each day. It could be a bit faster paced on a television production.
I'd say, I think it is a bit more fast paced on a television production because they've got to move through, like they've got that timeline for each episode, where I guess with a movie, you've got to keep going until it's finished, no matter what. And they might even add in a few extra things at the end there. But yeah, that television show has a much more rigid schedule. They've really got to be on top of it, which means you've got to be on top of it with your lines and making sure you're happy with your performance virtually straight away, not knowing that if you'll even get another take or if they'll just go with that one or the one before. So yeah, definitely a bit different in that sense.
That's one thing we talk about is on the show a fair bit. How you've got to maintain your work fitness in between roles, and 1 minute you're auditioning, next minute your work schedule's full on if it's a television series in particular, and it can be difficult for some people to go from zero to hero all of a sudden. And you're right, to your credit, like if you're not prepared, then you really aren't setting yourself up for success.
It'll be tricky.
Yeah, totally. Have you had a mentor or an acting coach that has really helped you along the way to sort of hone your craft and help you deal with all these heavy work schedules?
I actually haven't done any formal training acting wise.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up singing and dancing, but that was just always kind of a big part of my family and my lifestyle. But acting wise, it was just something I never trained for. Once I got cast as Eloise, I was fortunate enough to get introduced by the director, Charles Shire, to his ex-wife, Nancy Meyers. And One of the things she said to my mum was, don't ever let this girl get acting coaching or something along those lines. And not that we, necessarily took it on board, but it's just something that I guess just never really happened for me. And
if it isn't broken, don't fix it.
Just taking my own spin on things, and the director will tell you otherwise, I guess, if that's not what they're looking for.
They certainly will.
So I guess in terms of getting ready for that kind of big work schedule, it was just, a case of, as we said before, just being exposed to it from so young. You kind of know no different. When you're on set, you're there to do this job and it'll probably take this long, and that's just how it goes, I guess. You either want to be there and do it or you don't.
Exactly. And what kind of roles are you interested in these days? I mean, what attracts you to a specific script?
Yeah, I'd have to say it's very probably script and role dependent.
Uh-huh.
I don't think I necessarily have a particular genre that I'm drawn to or a particular character type. I actually don't mind. Sometimes a script will come through for a character that's really similar to me and I can relate to that, and I think, okay, great. That's super easy. That reminds me of something that I do every day.
Right.
And other times I'll get scripts that are completely different to me, like couldn't be more poles apart, but I quite enjoy that as a challenge, just to really hone in onto a different part of me. So I don't actually necessarily think I'm attracted to a certain type. I think it comes down to probably what the script itself is, how much access you have to that, and just the general premise of the show or the movie, and if that's something that appeals to you, if you think it's something you'll enjoy, because I think that's really important as well. There's no point auditioning for something that you absolutely could not see yourself doing in a million years, because, you're not going to enjoy that, and they're probably not going to enjoy that either watching it.
For those characters that are so different that you might at first glance find it difficult to relate to, and as you say, you love that challenge, do you try and look for certain things, certain commonalities with your own personality to try and help you get into the character?
Yeah, I think generally you'll always find one or two things, even if it's just some small experience that you had a while ago or a part of your personality that exists within you, but you don't necessarily show it too much. So I think there's always something that you can kind of hone in on, even if it is deep down. And for the rest of it, you can just kind of either bring that out more or try and build around it with things that you wouldn't normally do. But again, that's half the fun of it, just doing saying the opposite of what you normally might say. It's all part acting, I guess.
That's the challenge. Speaking of challenges, you were filming during the pandemic too with Young Rock. I mean, there's so many questions around Young Rock, but I guess just as an actor, thank goodness you're able to work during the pandemic. But how different was it on set?
Look, it was quite different in terms of that was for me in the end of 2020. So we were still in, I guess, year one of the pandemic.
Yeah. That was the full-on year too. I still remember those first lockdowns. It was really scary.
Yeah. It was just after things had started to open in the industry again, very early on. It was filmed in Queensland and I'm from New South Wales. So I did do the 2-week stint in hotel quarantine. That was an experience on its own. I mean, when my agent kind of said to me, oh, you'll have to do 2 weeks quarantine, I thought nothing of it. I thought, oh, great. Like I'm excited to be working. The show's great. But once I got there, it kind of dawned on me like, okay, this is 2 weeks in a room. Lucky I've got a nice view.
It's a long time. It's a long time for an actor who you're used to people, right? And you're used to being surrounded by people.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm such an active person anyway that just, I mean, having to do kind of laps in a tiny hotel room is something. But we did do a couple of script read-throughs in that 2 weeks. That was nice. So we kind of virtually met each other before we all met. We could sympathize with one another looking at which hotels we were all stationed at.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
I actually finished one of my uni degrees in that quarantine as well because all exams were online. So honestly, it was quite productive in its own way.
Whether you liked it or not, I guess you had to try and, when you're studying a university degree for something to do, while you're locked in the pandemic. Well done.
Oh, just casually. If you had told me 3 years ago how it would have finished up, I wouldn't have believed you.
If it was 3 weeks, you would have done another degree, Yeah,
exactly. But once we got out, I mean, as you can imagine, things were quite strict with obviously mask wearing was a big thing. We got tested multiple times a week on and off set, even if you weren't on that day. I remember they used to come around to like your accommodation building and test you. That was quite funny. I guess stuff that you just never would have thought about a few years ago. And that was just part of it. They were very great with like keeping the protocols up. So I never really actually felt at risk. I always felt really safe with the way things were done. And in terms of once you were actually filming the scene and the cameras were rolling, that part itself felt quite normal by then. It was more kind of, I guess, the external stuff within the production that you could feel like, oh, we're social distancing at lunch, or quick, we can only have 2 people in the trailers at once. That kind of thing was where you just had to remember all your little rules and regulations.
Extra layers of complexity, yeah. I know when they were filming, I think Neighbours was actually one of the first productions to go back globally. Just after the first lockdown, and they divided the cast and crew into 3 sections.
Oh, the zones?
Yeah. So if one zone got infected, and there was like a handful, maybe 3 or 4 actors that could go between.
Yeah.
So that if one zone went down, the other 2 were okay. Was it kind of something similar for Young Rock, or was it?
Yeah, you have jogged my memory there. We did have the zones as well that we were divided into. At the same time, I have to say we were fortunate enough that the cases in Queensland, from my memory, weren't at a crazy number like they kind of are these days.
Yeah, no,
so that was
really
one
good.
thing. I mean, they probably seemed crazy at the time, but in hindsight, it was nothing. But yeah, we were in a pod, and I was really grateful that we were in a pod of a few of us that were all in scenes together. So we were all really that same age. We could all hang out heaps because none of us were from Queensland, so we all had plenty of time to spend together and dinner, etc., all those kinds of things. So
that's great.
The pod actually worked quite well for me, to be honest.
Yeah, it just helped in your preparation. It was like extra preparation.
It honestly was. We hung out so much off set, and yeah, we became really great friends in what in hindsight was a short stint, but once you've, I guess, shared that hotel quarantine experience, you've got plenty to bond over.
Oh my God, 14 days, long time. So did you know early on that Young Rock was going to be huge, or is it just once it's landed now in the general public, it's like you can appreciate how big it is?
Well, when I first auditioned for it, it wasn't called Young Rock. It had whatever the working title was. It also didn't even have like the Rock's name in the script. Like they changed it to something else. So it was all kind of, I guess,
all on the down low.
We didn't actually know.
Yep.
And then it wasn't kind of till like my agent said something like, oh, it's all going through like some of the higher ups at NBC. They want to review each person before they cast anyone. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, all right. Then, once we found out kind of more what the project was, it was like, oh, that's going to be really fun. That's going to be awesome. And it absolutely was. Whether it ended up being big or not, the experience was just so phenomenal. But as I think someone turned around and said to me a few months ago, like, oh, anything The Rock touches, it's automatically big. So, that is right? The Rock. So,
and no pressure. But
I didn't think about it at the time. But looking at it now, it's like, oh, wow, I'm so happy to have played a small part in someone's life story, regardless of who it is. That's something that they'll always look back on. And I'm happy that I could be part of that in some small way.
That's great. And it's so weird too. Like it's this huge, the senior executives at NBC have to sign off on it. And there you are just filming in Queensland, So it's like,
exactly. That's,
strange.
In some ways, I'm absolutely, like, obviously COVID has been so difficult for everyone in some sense, but on the other end of the spectrum, it's probably likely that it wouldn't have filmed here if it wasn't for COVID.
Yeah.
So I look at it that way, like COVID took so much, but it also did give me my first job back afterwards. And I'm so grateful that that's where they decided to film, bring it to Australia. Woohoo! We love that.
And now, if you were looking back at a 10-year-old self, at young Jordana, the singer-dancer, maybe somewhat actor, what do you wish you would have known back then as a youngster?
Oh,
what would you tell your young self?
If I was going to tell myself anything, I wish I would just have known how fast everything goes. You don't realize until you're there in the moment that these are the days. These really are the ones that, like, you'll look back on in the future, and goodness, if you don't make the most of them then and enjoy them, they're gone. Like, I look back and it's last year we kind of, I'm pretty sure it was last year, we had like the 10-year anniversary of Judy Moody, and I think that is crazy. I can't even fathom that. I still feel like that was just last year. So if only I had it, and I did make the most of it, but it's just a case of knowing how fast it goes. You really got to take every moment and grab onto it for as long as you can. And
that's great how you were saying how even as an 9-year-old on set, you're still really present and enjoying the world around you. It's not normal for a normal child to be exposed, but you're really enjoying it and really present, and I think that's great. Sort of
I do
mature
definitely
beyond
have
years.
kind of an interest in all the aspects of film and television. So not just in front of the camera, but I, from a young age, have appreciated how integral every single person's part is: cast, crew, all the little gears that make the cogs turn. And I really enjoy people doing all their little individual jobs. I love watching other people getting their hair and makeup done, or watching the new shot being set up. I find it so interesting.
You're just learning all the time. And I guess, when you're
learning.
That's great. So at such a young age, still just watching everyone, all these other departments, and like, so inquisitive. What does this department do? And
it's so interesting though. I don't think people realize just how the sheer volume of people involved in either a small project or a big project. You're always going to have far more people than what you realize just watching it on a screen. It's crazy.
That's right. And I think, people only see the success on the television screen or in the cinema. They don't appreciate all of those moving pieces that you don't see.
Yeah. Even so, the pieces that you don't see behind the scenes, and even all the stuff that gets shot that doesn't necessarily make it in. They always overshoot on everything, so they've got things to work with. But even yourself as an actor, you don't know what's going to really come on until you watch it as well. So I think a lot of people think say for a 20-minute or 30-minute episode, I think a lot of people have in their mind that that's, a really quick couple of days shoot. And on some shows it might be that, but on most of them, that's not the case at all. And they've ended up with so much footage that will never get used. And I'm glad I'm not the person in the editing chair, that's for sure.
It's crazy.
I would not know how to make those decisions.
So it's interesting, certainly growing up in the business and learning so much on set. And I guess as you've grown up, have you learnt about an appreciation perhaps or acknowledgement of the business behind, all the moving parts that happen before you even turn up on set?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before you even go, it's crazy to think how much has gone into just getting you there on that day, or the runarounds, or the phone calls, the emails, all that kind of stuff. Every little detail, particularly filming overseas where you're not in your home base, and as a child, the amount of moving parts in that alone, which my parents will tell me stories about now and then because I might not have known at the time, is just wow. They really do have to plan every single second when you're not in your own town. They've got to organize every single thing, where you're going to live, what car are you going to drive, all that things that, I don't know, we don't even think about here, but all of a sudden someone's organizing that for you, which in one way is great because the pressure's off you, but it's like, wow, there are so many jobs floating around, and it's crazy.
I think also as a child actor, there's only a certain amount of time you're able to be allowed to work on set. So there's that extra layer of pressure.
Yeah, I think, I never have felt pressured, but I definitely have observed maybe production feeling pressured, like, oh, they've only got such and such minutes till they've got to go on break, that kind of thing. And I can't really honestly remember the laws in America that much, but obviously it's all very strict in how long you can go for. I do remember it well in Australia, because when I was working on Billy Elliot, we had a child cast involved as well. And because that was only 2 years ago, that was fresh in my mind about how often the breaks had to happen. So that would create not just a break for the children, but in a lot of cases, a pause for the whole company for a little bit. And it's, of course, if things are running a little bit behind, everyone's bound to get a little bit, stressed or nervous. But no, I think it's really great they have those protocols in place, because it does make for an enjoyable experience for everyone. And then kids, when they get older, can appreciate that everything was, done well for them.
And that's great that you didn't feel any pressure as a child like that. You were just... looking back, it's like, how the hell did they manage the logistics? Yeah. But at the time, you were really present and enjoying your experience, which is exactly what you'd want.
A lot of people used to ask me, like, oh, what does it feel like? You're going to work every day, something like that. And I would say, oh, but it's not work to me. Like, I'm going and I'm doing what I love and I have fun. It's never actually felt like work at all. So, and even now, like, if I'm lucky enough to be filming something or performing something, it doesn't feel like work to me, because it's just so enjoyable.
That's great.
And that's, really important for everyone, no matter what you do, I guess.
Exactly. It's a great test that over the years, you've still got that fresh, yearning for more fun on set, and enjoying each character.
Always.
And speaking of next, what's coming up for you? What are you working on at the moment?
Well, hopefully I'm hopeful that this is hopefully the end of any lockdowns and things can finally just open up for good, not be worried about, I know that productions have been worried before, like, oh, if we start this, what if we get shut down? Hopefully we're finished with that finally. I am currently in my final year of my master's degree at uni. So
congratulations.
I've got a couple of months left. Thank you. A couple of months left to finish that off. So that'll be nice once I can say it's done and dusted. And in the meantime, that's crazy busy at the moment. But other than that, I'm still obviously auditioning for stuff anytime it comes along. Sometimes I do have to be a little bit picky, just being in this final year. I have important placements and that I can't miss. So I'll be grateful when that part of it's over and I can just fully commit myself to auditioning for anything and everything that I want to. But just like everyone else, taking it day by day, whatever comes and going from there.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you're busy, and certainly for the next couple of months on the Masters. So thanks for taking your time.
This is great.
Thanks for having a chat. We do appreciate it. It's always nice to learn from everyone's experience.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so good to hear other people's stories as well, that you guys, you get to talk to so many interesting people, and it's really great to listen to.
It's a lot of fun. Thanks. I'm glad you enjoy it. All right. Well, thank you, Jordana Beatty. Appreciate your time. And don't forget to listen, download and follow Two Unemployed Actors.
Two unemployed actors.